A millionaire found a baby wearing a necklace of his wife when he brought the baby. The church bells of Chicago tolled midnight on Christmas Eve, their solemn chimes muffled by the heavy snowfall. Alexander Blackwood, his Italian wool coat dusted with white flakes, hurried through the empty streets, eager to surprise his wife Sophie with his early return. The colored lights from Christmas trees in shop windows cast shifting shadows on the freshly fallen snow, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Then he heard it so faint he almost convinced himself it was just the wind. A baby's cry, barely audible over the gentle whisper of falling snow. Alexander stopped, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The cry came again, weaker this time, from a dark alley between two buildings. Every protective instinct in his body screamed that something was terribly wrong. "Hello," he called out, his voice echoing off brick walls. "Is someone there?" Only the cry answered him, growing fainter with each passing second. Alexander's heart pounded as he turned down the alley, phone flashlight illuminating the darkness. There, beneath a snow-covered cardboard box, lay a tiny bundle wrapped in a thin blanket. As he knelt beside it, his hands trembling from more than just the cold, something golden glinted at the baby's throat. Alexander's blood froze. Around the infant's neck hung his wife Sophie's precious locket, the one he'd given her on their first anniversary, containing her photograph. "Dear God," he whispered, carefully lifting the nearly frozen child. "What kind of miracle or curse is this?" Before we dive into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. If this is your first time discovering the channel or you haven't subscribed yet, please support us by clicking the subscribe button. It truly means a lot to us. Thank you so much. Alexander Blackwood had everything money could buy, but the pristine walls of his lakeshore mansion felt hollow on nights like these. At 45, he had built an empire in Chicago's real estate market, turning abandoned buildings into luxury developments. Oh, the irony didn't escape him. He'd made his fortune transforming forgotten places while carrying the weight of his own abandonment. 20 years ago, in his rise to success, he had made a choice that haunted him every Christmas Eve. Her name was Rachel, a young artist who believed in his dreams when he was nothing but an ambitious real estate agent. When she told him about the pregnancy, his fear of responsibility, of failing like his own father had, drove him to walk away. "I can't be a father," he had told her. "I'll send money, but I can't be there." He never saw her again. The guilt followed him like a shadow, growing darker with each passing year. Even his substantial donations to children's charities couldn't quiet the voice in his head that whispered, "Somewhere out there, you have a child who thinks their father didn't want them." Meeting Sophie 5 years ago seemed like redemption. A pediatric surgeon with gentle hands and a heart big enough to forgive his past, she made him believe in second chances. Their inability to conceive became a cruel joke of fate. The man who once abandoned his unborn child now desperately yearned for one. Alexander spent countless nights in his home office, staring at the adoption papers they'd been considering. The background checks required would surely uncover his past, and he dreaded the day Sophie would learn the truth. How could he tell her that, while she dedicated her life to saving children, he had once turned his back on his own? His private investigator had located Rachel 5 years ago. She had died in a car accident, taking any knowledge of his child's fate to her grave. The uncertainty tormented him. Was his child alive? Happy? Did they inherit his steel gray eyes or Rachel's artistic soul? These thoughts plagued him, especially during Christmas, when the sight of families shopping together, fathers carrying children on their shoulders, felt like personal accusations. The expensive gifts he bought for children's hospitals each year were his penance, but never enough to wash away the stain on his conscience. Now, at the pinnacle of his success, Alexander Blackwood was a man divided, respected by his peers, admired for his philanthropy, yet haunted by the cowardice of his younger self. The chrome and glass tower bearing his name stood as a monument to his achievements, while the framed family photos in his office told a carefully curated lie that he was simply a successful man who hadn't been blessed with children yet. Little did he know, as he rushed home through the snowy Chicago streets that Christmas Eve, that fate had a peculiar way of bringing past sins full circle. The baby's cry he would hear in that dark alley would set in motion events that would force him to confront not just his past, but the very nature of redemption itself. The children's ward at Chicago Memorial Hospital still bore traces of Dr. Sophie Blackwood's legacy. Her photo hung in the Hall of Distinguished Physicians Dr. Sophie Harrison, Chief of Pediatric Surgery 2018 to 2022, a testament to the lives she'd saved before her unexpected resignation. What the plaque didn't show was the weight of secrets she carried or the price of silence that bought her current life. In the privacy of her home office, Sophie often traced her fingers over a worn photograph hidden in her desk drawer. Two identical girls, age 6, in matching Christmas dresses, Victoria and Sophie Harrison, the inseparable twins until they weren't. The memory of that Christmas night 25 years ago still haunted her. Their parents' whispered arguments, Victoria's confusion as she was led away by strangers, the official story that Sophie was an only child. "It's better this way," her mother had said. Victoria is different, troubled. The adoption is for the best. Sophie learned early that in Chicago's elite social circles, inconvenient truths were simply erased, like editing a family portrait. She threw herself into medicine, as if saving other children could atone for her silence about Victoria. Every Christmas she would volunteer for extra shifts in the pediatric ward, decorating rooms and playing Santa. Her colleagues praised her dedication, never knowing she was trying to dull the ache of another Christmas without her twin. Then came the letter 3 months ago. Victoria had found her. "I know you're married to Alexander Blackwood," now the letter read. "Does he know about me? About what our family did?" Sophie burned the letter, but couldn't burn the truth it carried. Her marriage to Alexander felt like a miracle at first. He understood her passion for helping children, supported her career, never pressured her about starting a family. But their fertility struggles had revealed cracks in their perfect facade. Each failed attempt felt like punishment for her past silence. What tormented Sophie most was her recent discovery Victoria had become a prominent child rights activist, fighting against family separation. The irony was unbearable. While Sophie lived in luxury, the sister she'd let be taken away was battling the very system that had torn them apart. She'd kept tabs on Victoria through social media, watching her sister's transformation from troubled teen to fierce advocate. The recent news of Victoria's breakdown after a particularly traumatic case involving twins had sent Sophie into a spiral of guilt. Yet still, she said nothing to Alexander. Last week, she'd seen Victoria outside the hospital, watching her. Their eyes met briefly before Victoria disappeared into the crowd. Sophie had nearly collapsed, knowing the confrontation she'd feared for 25 years was coming. The positive pregnancy test hidden in her bathroom cabinet added another layer of complexity. She hadn't told Alexander yet, couldn't tell him, not with Victoria's shadow looming over their lives. How could she celebrate bringing a child into the world when she'd been complicit in taking one away from her family? In moments of quiet desperation, Sophie would stand in their future nursery, a room filled with unopened baby furniture and unspoken dreams. The empty crib seemed to mock her, a reminder of all the children she'd saved and the one she'd failed to protect. Tonight, as she prepared for another lonely Christmas Eve without Alexander, Sophie felt the weight of her secrets becoming unbearable. She touched the locket at her throat, Alexander's gift, containing a photo of their happy life together. A life built on carefully constructed lies that were about to unravel. Victoria Harrison stood before the mirror in her small apartment on Chicago's South Side, her reflection a perfect match for the sister who lived in luxury 20 miles north. The irony wasn't lost on her. While Sophie saved children in state-of-the-art hospitals, Victoria rescued them from the shadows, working with Chicago's forgotten youth as a child advocacy lawyer and crisis counselor. The walls of her office at the Children's Rights Foundation were covered with success stories, photographs of reunited families, thank you letters from parents, artwork from saved children. But nobody saw the shrine in her apartment newspaper clippings about the Harrison family, Sophie's career highlights, the wedding announcement of Sophie Blackwood nee Harrison. A timeline of the life she should have shared. The truth of her adoption had emerged during a routine background check for law school. No adoption papers existed. Instead, she found hospital records of her commitment to a juvenile psychiatric facility at age 6, all because she tried to protect Sophie from their father's rage. The troubled child label had stuck, giving their parents the perfect excuse to erase her from their perfect family narrative. 3 months ago, Victoria had faced her most challenging case, teenage twins separated by the system. Something in her broke that day. She'd gone home, pulled out the ultrasound photo she kept hidden in her desk, and finally confronted the deeper wound she'd been running from. Last spring, she'd been attacked walking home from a late-night custody hearing. The pregnancy that resulted became both her deepest shame and greatest hope. For 7 months, she'd protected her unborn child, believing she could overcome her trauma through motherhood. But when her son was born on a cold November night, the face that looked back at her was her attacker's. In a moment of despair, she'd left him at a church, pinning Sophie's photo to his blanket, a final, desperate cry for help from the sister who'd once promised to always protect her. Immediate regret drove her back to the church an hour later, but her baby was gone. The police dismissed her, a single woman with a history of mental health issues, no proof of birth, no witnesses. Her anguish turned to fury when her private investigator reported the truth: her son was now in Sophie's care, her perfect sister once again taking what should have been hers. Victoria's work had shown her the ugly truth about family separation, how the privileged could discard children who didn't fit their narrative, how money and influence could rewrite history. She'd spent years fighting this system, never telling her colleagues that she was a product of it herself. The breakdown they whispered about wasn't a breakdown at all. It was awakening. Years of therapy had taught her to recognize that her troubled childhood was really a child's response to family trauma. Her activism wasn't just a career, it was a mission to prevent what happened to her from happening to others. Tonight, watching the snow fall outside her window, Victoria toyed with the medallion she'd worn since childhood, the only proof she had of her true identity. Inside was a faded photo of 2 identical 6-year-old girls in Christmas dresses, taken the day before her world shattered. Her laptop showed the latest surveillance photo: Sophie entering Chicago Memorial, Alexander's car at their mansion, her son being cared for by their staff. The Harrison family had erased her once. The Blackwoods wouldn't get the chance to do it again. A text message lit up her phone: all arrangements made for tonight. Team in position. Victoria closed her eyes, touching the ultrasound photo one last time. "I'm coming for you," she whispered, both to the baby and to the sister who'd betrayed her. "This Christmas we'll all face the truth." The flashing red and green lights from storefronts caught in the crystalline snowflakes, creating halos of color in the darkness. Alexander knelt in the alley, his expensive cashmere coat soaking up dirty slush, cradling the nearly frozen infant. The baby's skin felt like ice against his fingers as he frantically wrapped his scarf around the tiny body. "Hold on, little one," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Please hold on." The locket around the baby's neck seemed to burn against his palm, Sophie's photograph inside haunting him with questions he couldn't begin to process. The last time he'd seen this locket, it had been around his wife's neck at breakfast 3 days ago. His hands trembled as he tried to warm the baby, memories of Rachel and his abandoned past threatening to overwhelm him. A group of carolers passed by the alley's entrance, their voices carrying the gentle strains of Silent Night. The juxtaposition of their peaceful hymn against this scene of desperation made Alexander's chest tighten. 20 years ago, he'd walked away from his own child. Now, fate had literally placed an abandoned baby in his arms. The infant's cry grew weaker, barely a whimper now. Alexander pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over 911. One call would bring help, would be the right thing to do. But something about the locket, about the deliberate placement of this child where he would find it, made him hesitate. Dear God, he prayed, for the first time in decades, give me a sign. What am I supposed to do? As if in answer, the baby's eyes fluttered open, revealing eyes so startlingly like his own that Alexander nearly dropped the phone. Grey eyes with that same distinctive gold fleck he saw in the mirror every morning. Eyes that seemed to hold all the accusations of his past. A police siren wailed in the distance. Alexander made his decision, tucking the baby inside his coat. I failed one child, he whispered. I won't fail another. He stepped out of the alley into the swirling snow, flagging down a passing taxi. Chicago Memorial, he ordered, then looked down at the bundle against his chest. Hold on, little one. Whatever game fate is playing, whatever connection you have to Sophie, I swear I'll protect you this time. The taxi's headlights cut through the thickening snow, passing brightly lit homes where families celebrated Christmas Eve together. Alexander saw his reflection in the window, a successful man in an expensive coat, cradling a foundling like something from a Dickens novel. The irony wasn't lost on him. The baby stirred weakly, tiny fingers gripping his shirt. Alexander felt tears freeze on his cheeks as he remembered another Christmas Eve, another baby he'd never held. I'm here, he whispered, not sure if he was speaking to the child in his arms or the one he'd abandoned 2 decades ago. This time I'm here. The Blackwood Mansion's Christmas lights cast an ethereal glow across the snow-covered lawn as Alexander's taxi approached. Through the frost-etched windows, he could see the massive Christmas tree in their foyer, its lights twinkling like stars. The baby had grown quiet against his chest, breathing shallow but steady. Sophie, he called out as he entered, his voice echoing through the marble foyer. Sophie, I need you down here now. The sound of heels on hardwood answered him. Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs, elegant in a black cocktail dress, presumably for the hospital's Christmas gala. The color drained from her face as her eyes fixed on the bundle in Alexander's arms. No, she whispered, gripping the banister. It's not possible. Alexander watched his wife's reaction carefully. There was something in her expression beyond mere shock. Was it recognition? Fear? Sophie, I found him in an alley. He's wearing your locket. Sophie's hand flew to her throat where the locket should have been. She hadn't even noticed it missing, having been too preoccupied with her own secrets these past days. Her legs seemed to give way as she descended the stairs. Let me see him, she said, her doctor's instincts apparently overriding whatever had caused her initial reaction. Her hands trembled as she took the baby, but her medical assessment was swift and professional. He's hypothermic. We need to warm him gradually. Mrs. Jensen, she called to their housekeeper. Bring warm blankets and prepare some lukewarm water. Alexander watched his wife work, noting how she deliberately avoided looking at the locket. Sophie, how did your necklace end up around his neck? What aren't you telling me? Before she could answer, the baby began to seize. Sophie's professional demeanor cracked. No, she whispered, clutching the infant closer. Not again. I can't lose another one. Another one, Alexander asked sharply, but Sophie was already rushing toward the kitchen where Mrs. Jensen had prepared the warm water. As they worked to stabilize the baby's temperature, Alexander noticed Sophie's hands shaking, saw the tears she was fighting to hold back. These weren't just a doctor's reactions to a patient. There was something deeper, more personal in her desperate attempts to save this child. He needs a hospital, Alexander insisted, reaching for his phone. No, Sophie's response was too quick, too sharp. I can care for him here. The hospital will have questions, there will be police involvement. On Christmas Eve, it could take hours before he receives proper care. Trust me, Alexander, please. The plea in her voice gave him pause. In their 5 years of marriage, he'd never heard that note of desperation from his usually composed wife. Suddenly, Sophie swayed, her face going pale. "I don't feel," she began, before collapsing into Alexander's arms. As he caught her, the baby still safely cradled against her chest. An envelope fell from her dress pocket. Alexander managed to lower them both safely to the kitchen floor. He glimpsed the envelope's contents, an ultrasound image dated 3 weeks ago, and a handwritten note that made his blood run cold. "I know you have my son. Did you think you could keep him from me forever, sister?" The baby whimpered, and Alexander looked between his unconscious wife and the mysterious infant with his eyes. Nothing made sense, yet somehow everything was connected. Outside, the church bells began to toll midnight, welcoming Christmas Day with their solemn chorus. Mrs. Jensen rushed in with more blankets, gasping at the scene before her. "Sir, should I call an ambulance?" Alexander held his wife and the baby, feeling the weight of secrets threatening to crush them all. "Yes," he said quietly. "And Mrs. Jensen, call my private investigator. Tell him it's an emergency. Christmas Eve or not, I need answers now." Chicago Memorial's emergency room blazed with harsh fluorescent light, a stark contrast to the gentle snow falling outside. Alexander paced the waiting room, his thoughts racing between 2 trauma rooms, one where doctors worked to stabilize Sophie, another where pediatric specialists fought to save the baby. Mr. Blackwood, a grave-faced doctor, approached. "I'm Dr. Chen, Chief of Oncology. We found something concerning in your wife's blood work. Has Mrs. Blackwood mentioned any symptoms recently? Fatigue? Unexplained bruising?" Alexander's world tilted. "Oncology? What are you saying?" "Your wife has acute leukemia, Mr. Blackwood. It's aggressive, and in her condition. She's approximately 12 weeks pregnant. The cancer complicates everything. Without immediate treatment, she has days, maybe weeks. But the treatment could harm the baby she's carrying." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Alexander, one baby fighting for life in the NICU, another threatened by the very treatment that might save his wife. Before he could process this, his phone buzzed his private investigator. "Mr. Blackwood, you need to see this security footage from your house 3 days ago." The video showed a woman identical to Sophie entering their home using a key. The timestamp matched when Alexander was away. The woman went straight to the nursery they'd prepared years ago but never used, emerging with a bundle in her arms. "That's impossible," Alexander whispered. "Sophie was at the hospital that day. I checked her schedule." "Exactly," the investigator replied. "Your wife has an identical twin, sir. Victoria Harrison, she's a child rights activist with. Concerning recent behavior, there's more facial recognition, just matched her entering the pediatric ward 10 minutes ago." Alexander's blood ran cold. He sprinted toward the NICU, already knowing what he'd find. The baby was gone. In the crib lay Sophie's locket, now open, revealing not one but 2 photos, twin girls in Christmas dresses, their smiles identical, their futures diverging. A nurse rushed up, panicked. "Mr. Blackwood." A woman with credentials, she said she was Dr. Blackwood. "She took the baby for urgent tests. We only realized something was wrong when the real Dr. Chen called about the missing patient." Alexander's phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Did you think you could keep him from me twice? Check your wife's personal email. The truth has been there all along. You have 1 hour to come alone to St. Michael's Church, or you'll never see him again." Racing back to Sophie's room, Alexander found her conscious but weak. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw his expression. "I can explain," she whispered. "Your twin sister." "The baby, is he hers? How long have you known?" Before Sophie could answer, her monitors began screaming. "She's crashing," a nurse yelled. "Get a crash cart." As medical staff rushed in, Alexander stood frozen in the doorway. His phone buzzed again. 59 minutes left. Tick-tock. Every family has its sins, brother-in-law. Time to face ours. Through the window, he could see the church spire in the distance, its cross illuminated against the snowy night sky. The baby Victoria's son, his godson, the child Sophie had hidden, needed him. But so did his wife, fighting for her life with their unborn child. The hospital chaplain touched his arm gently. "Sir, if there are any calls you need to make, now would be the time." Inside Sophie's room, doctors worked frantically. Through the chaos, her voice reached him, weak but clear. "Find him, Alexander. Save him. I never told you everything about that Christmas night when they took her away. We all need redemption. Please." Her voice faded as the monitors flat-lined. In that moment, standing between his dying wife and a kidnapped baby, Alexander Blackwood faced an impossible choice. Outside, the Christmas snow continued to fall, indifferent to the tragedy unfolding beneath the sterile hospital lights. Dear readers, if this story has touched your heart, we'd be honored to share more such emotional journeys with you. Each subscription helps us create stories that explore the depths of human love, redemption, and hope. Join our community of storytellers and readers who believe in the power of second chances. Together, we can continue bringing these touching narratives to life. Snow had turned Chicago's streets into a maze of white shadows as Alexander's car sped towards St. Michael's Church. The dashboard clock read 1:17 a.m. 43 minutes left. His phone displayed Sophie's email, finally unlocked with their wedding date. "My dearest sister, I saw you outside the hospital today. I know what happened to you. I should have protected you back then. When I found your baby at the church, I thought God was giving me a chance to make things right. Please forgive me. He's safe. He's loved." Draft. Never sent. Alexander's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The radio played "Oh Holy Night," its lyrics about a divine child taking on painful new meaning. At a red light, he studied the surveillance photo his investigator sent Victoria entering the hospital wearing Sophie's old ID badge. Same face, but where Sophie's eyes held warmth, Victoria's burned with something harder. His phone rang the hospital. "Mr. Blackwood, we've stabilized your wife, but we need to start treatment immediately. The pregnancy complicates things. We need your decision about the experimental protocol. But how long can you wait? The cancer is aggressive. Hours maybe. The baby or the treatment, Mr. Blackwood. You need to choose." The light turned green. Alexander accelerated, his mind racing. 20 years ago, he'd chosen his future over his unborn child. Now fate was demanding another impossible choice. St. Michael's loomed ahead, its Gothic spires disappearing into the snowy darkness. A lone figure stood on the steps, not Victoria, but an elderly priest. "She said you'd come," the priest said quietly. "I've known Victoria since she started volunteering at our youth shelter. What happened to her? It broke something in her soul." "What do you mean?" "She was attacked in our parking lot, helping a teenage runaway. 9 months ago, the priest's eyes were heavy with guilt. I found her afterward. She made me promise not to call police. Said no one would believe the troubled Harrison twin anyway." Alexander felt sick. "The baby?" "She brought him here last month. Said she couldn't look at him without seeing. But when she came back an hour later, he was gone. Then last week, she saw a photo in a charity newsletter, her son at a hospital event in Sophie Blackwood's arms." Oh, a text lit up Alexander's phone. "Time's running out. The abandoned Carson Street orphanage. Come alone. No police, or you'll never see any of us again." "She's not well," the priest warned. "The attack, losing her baby, finding him with her sister, it was too much. She needs help, not handcuffs." Alexander's phone buzzed again. The hospital. Sophie was asking for him. The experimental treatment couldn't wait. "Sometimes," the priest said softly, "God gives us impossible choices to teach us about mercy." Snow swirled around them as Alexander made his decision. The dashboard clock blinked 1:34 a.m. In the distance, Christmas lights twinkled indifferently, marking homes where families slept peacefully, unaware of the drama unfolding in their city's shadows. Father Alexander said, "Finally, I need you to go to Chicago Memorial. Tell my wife, tell her I understand now. About choices, about mercy." He turned toward Carson Street, where his investigator reported a light in an abandoned orphanage window. Behind him, church bells began tolling, marking the hour, counting down the time until all their fates would be decided. The rhythmic beep of hospital monitors punctuated Sophie's consciousness as memories flooded back. Through her morphine haze, past and present blurred together, each heartbeat bringing another fragment of the truth she'd tried so desperately to bury. Beep. November 15th, midnight. Standing in St. Michael's Church, finding Victoria's baby beneath the statue of Madonna and Child. The infant's grey eyes, so like Alexander's, seemed to bore into her soul. Victoria's journal had fallen from the blankets. "My precious son, forgive me. Every time I look at you, I see him the monster who hurt me. But your Aunt Sophie, she'll love you. She'll give you the family I can't." Beep. Age 6, Christmas Eve. Victoria screaming as men in white coats dragged her away. "Sophie, don't let them take me. You promised to protect me," but Sophie had stood frozen, clutching her new doll, as her parents erased her twin from their perfect life. Beep. Mrs. Blackwood, Dr. Chen's voice cut through the memories. "We need to discuss your options. The experimental treatment." My baby Sophie whispered. "The one Victoria took. He needs a family." "Mrs. Blackwood, we're talking about your pregnancy. The chemotherapy will terminate." "You don't understand," Sophie interrupted, tears streaming down her face. "I stole her child. I kept him, pretended I was just fostering him through the hospital program. Even Alexander didn't know. I thought I could save everyone this time." Beep. 3 days ago, Victoria standing in her hospital office, identical faces reflected in the window. "You took my son, just like they took me." "I was protecting him." "Like you protected me? By staying silent? Perfect Sophie, the family savior, playing God with people's lives again." Beep. The monitor's rhythm accelerated as Sophie struggled to sit up. "I need paper. Please. There's something Alexander needs to know." The nurse brought a notepad, and Sophie's shaking hands began to write. "My dearest Alexander, by now you know about Victoria, about the baby. But there's more. That Christmas Eve when they took her away, it wasn't because she was troubled. It was because she saw something. Our father, the great Jonathan Harrison, had been embezzling from his children's charity. Victoria threatened to tell, so they erased her. I was a coward then. I've been a coward every day since. When I found her baby, I thought God was giving me a chance to make things right. Instead, I've only caused more pain. The baby needs more than love, he needs justice. In my office safe, combination 122598, you'll find everything. The original documents Victoria saved. The proof of what our family did. The truth about where the missing charity millions went. Save them both. Alexander, save our baby too, if you can. But if you have to choose..." Beep. Code Blue, Dr. Chen shouted. "Crash cart to room 512. As doctors rushed to restart her heart, Sophie's last conscious thought was of another Christmas Eve, 2 little girls in matching dresses, making pinky promises to always protect each other. Outside her window, snow continued to fall on a city full of secrets, while somewhere in an abandoned orphanage, a baby's cry echoed through empty halls. The nurse found Sophie's unfinished letter, the last words trailing off into a shaky line. She handed it to the waiting chaplain, who read it and closed his eyes in prayer. In that moment, 25 years of carefully constructed lies began to unravel, spinning out into the snowy Chicago night like a thread pulling apart a sweater one tug, and the whole thing falls apart. The abandoned Carson Street orphanage loomed against the snowy sky like a Gothic nightmare, its broken windows reflecting Christmas lights from distant homes. Alexander found the side door unlocked, his footsteps echoing through dark corridors still decorated with faded children's drawings. "Welcome to where they send the unwanted ones," Victoria's voice echoed from above. "Fitting place for a family reunion, isn't it?" She stood at the top of the grand staircase, Sophie's stolen ID badge glinting at her throat. In her arms, the baby slept peacefully, wrapped in what Alexander recognized as Sophie's prized cashmere shawl. "You look just like her," Alexander said softly. "But you carry yourself differently, like someone who's been fighting their whole life." Observant Victoria descended slowly. "Did my perfect sister finally tell you the truth? About what happened that Christmas? About what she saw and did nothing?" The baby stirred, and Victoria's hard expression softened momentarily. Her hand trembled as she smoothed his hair, a gesture so like Sophie's that Alexander's chest tightened. "I was going to do it right this time," Victoria's voice cracked. "Be a proper mother. But when I saw his eyes, his father's eyes, I couldn't. I thought leaving him with Sophie was the answer. She always gets everything right, doesn't she? But then I saw her parading him at that hospital charity event, playing mother with my child." Victoria Alexander stepped forward. "Sophie's dying. The cancer." "Cancer," Victoria faltered. "No, you're lying. She can't be." "She's pregnant too. The treatment that could save her would kill the baby. She's refusing it," Victoria, still trying to protect everyone else first. Victoria's laugh was bitter. Even now, she has to be the saint, the martyr. "Did she tell you what our father did to those charity funds? How many children suffered while he built his empire? I tried to stop it. So they locked me away, labeled me unstable. And Sophie? She watched it happen." The baby began to cry. Victoria swayed, her composure cracking. "I hear him crying every night in my dreams. My son, I thought I was protecting him from my darkness. But I just abandoned him, like they abandoned me, like Sophie abandoned me." "It's not too late," Alexander said quietly. "For any of us. I know about second chances, Victoria. About the weight of choices we can't take back." He pulled out his phone, showing her the hospital security feed. Sophie in her bed, machines keeping her alive, her hand protectively over her pregnant belly. "But she kept every article about you," Alexander continued. "Every achievement, the children you've saved, the families you've reunited. She was a coward then, yes, but she's been trying to become worthy of being your sister ever since." Victoria's legs seemed to give way. She sank onto the stairs, clutching the baby. "I wanted her to suffer, to know what it feels like to lose everything. But not like this, not." Suddenly the baby seized in her arms, his tiny body rigid. "No," Victoria cried. "Please, not him too." "He needs a hospital." Alexander rushed forward. "Victoria, please, let me help you both." "You don't understand." She looked up, tears streaming. "There's a warrant out for me. The evidence about father, about the charity. I stole it back. It's why they're looking for me. If I go to the hospital, they'll arrest me. The truth will stay buried." Outside, police sirens wailed in the distance. The baby's breathing grew labored. "Then we'll find another way." Alexander held out his arms. "But right now, your son needs his mother to be stronger than her fear, than her pain, than her need for revenge." Victoria looked down at her baby, then at Sophie's image on the hospital feed. 25 years of Christmas Eve spent alone, of fury and abandonment and loss, crystallized in this moment of choice. "Redemption isn't a gift," she whispered, echoing words from one of her advocacy speeches. "Sometimes it's a choice we make in our darkest hour." The sirens grew closer. In the hospital, Sophie's monitors beeped steadily. And in a condemned orphanage on Christmas Eve, two broken souls stood on the precipice of either healing or destruction, while a tiny life hung in the balance between them. While Alexander raced the baby to the emergency room with Victoria, his private investigator, James Chen, breached the Harrison family's private vault at First Chicago Bank. The time lock had been scheduled to open for annual Christmas maintenance, a detail only someone intimate with the family would know. Mr. Blackwood Chen's voice crackled through Alexander's earpiece as doctors worked on the baby. "You need to see these files. The Harrison Children's Foundation wasn't just embezzling funds, they were trafficking children through fake adoptions." Victoria, standing beside Alexander, closed her eyes. December 25, 1998. "I found the ledger in Father's study. Hundreds of names. Children relocated from our hospitals to wealthy families. Their real parents told they had died." In the vault, Chen photographed document after document. "It's all here." Jonathan Harrison partnered with corrupt orphanages across 5 states. They targeted immigrant families, single mothers, anyone vulnerable. The foundation claimed to be helping them access medical care. "But they were stealing their children," Victoria finished. "When I threatened to expose it, Father didn't just commit me, he erased every record of my existence. The perfect solution: discredit the witness and demonstrate their charitable work by adopting out a troubled child." Alexander's phone buzzed with images from Chen, hospital records, bank transfers. A photo of 2 small girls in Christmas dresses, Sophie and Victoria, standing beside a man whose benevolent smile now seemed sinister. "There's more," Chen continued. "The program never stopped. The Harrison Foundation is still doing it. There's a shipment guard, they actually call it, that's scheduled for tonight. Christmas Eve adoptions are their specialty. More money from desperate families hoping for a Christmas miracle." Victoria's hands clenched. "The church. That's why I was attacked. I was getting too close to their current operation. They're still using St. Michael's as a drop point." Alexander stared at the baby, now stabilized in the NICU. Those grey eyes that had seemed like fate. "Victoria, is there any chance that my attack wasn't random?" She pulled out a creased photo. "My attacker wore a Harrison Foundation pin. I recognized it from Father's collection. When I realized I was pregnant, I tried to investigate, but..." Chen's voice cut in urgently. "Mr. Blackwood, there's a file here about Sophie. Medical records from when she was 6. She wasn't just a witness, she was a victim too. The night Victoria was taken. Sophie was drugged. That's why her memories are fractured. Their father had been experimenting with memory-altering drugs on the Foundation's children. His own daughters were his first test subjects." The monitors in Sophie's room began beeping erratically. Through the window, Alexander watched doctors rush to her side. "The cancer," Victoria whispered. "Could it be related?" "Long-term effects of whatever he gave us." Chen's sharp intake of breath confirmed their fears. "I'm looking at a long-term study. All the children who received the treatments. High rates of leukemia in their 30s. Harrison knew. He's been paying off families for years." A nurse emerged from Sophie's room. "Mr. Blackwood, your wife is asking for Victoria. She's remembering things she says can't be possible." Outside the hospital, Christmas Eve celebrations continued, but in a sterile corridor, surrounded by the beeping of monitors and the weight of generational sins, Alexander Blackwood realized the true horror. This wasn't just about one family's secrets. They were standing on the edge of exposing a decades-long conspiracy that had destroyed countless lives. His phone buzzed again. Chen had found something else in the vault. A list of names. Children taken on Christmas Eve's past, present, and future. At the top of tonight's list, Blackwood Harrison, infant, male. Status pending retrieval. They hadn't just found Victoria's baby by chance. They had been coming to take Alexander and Sophie's unborn child too. 2 police officers stood guard outside Sophie's hospital room as Alexander paced the corridor, torn between his wife's bedside and the NICU where Victoria sat with her son. Through the window, he He watched Sophie struggle to write something in her journal, her hands shaking from the experimental drugs now coursing through her system. Mr. Blackwood, Dr. Chen approached, his face grave. The drug protocol your father-in-law tested on the children. It's the basis for our current treatment. Using it might save Sophie, but we'd be using the very thing that destroyed all those lives, Alexander finished. The irony was savage. Inside her room, Sophie beckoned him. Her voice was weak but urgent. I remember everything now. That Christmas Eve, Father didn't just take Victoria. He made me watch. Said it would be a lesson in necessary sacrifices for the greater good. Her words were interrupted by a violent coughing fit. When she could speak again, her eyes were filled with tears. I didn't just stay silent, Alexander. I convinced myself it was right. Became a pediatric surgeon, thinking I could atone by saving other children. But really, I was just helping them identify more targets for the foundation. In the NICU, Victoria watched her son's chest rise and fall, her fingers tracing the hospital bracelet that marked him as baby Blackwood. A nurse tried to explain his treatment plan, but Victoria's attention was fixed on the security guards visible through the window. "They're not here to protect us," she said when Alexander entered. "They're Harrison Foundation security. I recognize them from the charity Gallus. They're waiting to take him as soon as he's stable." Alexander's private investigator had confirmed her fears. The Foundation's reach extended deep into Chicago's power structure: police, hospitals, courts. They had less than hours before somebody made them all disappear. "I have a plan," Alexander said quietly, "but you won't like it. Neither will Sophie." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "More than I hate knowing my son's grandfather orchestrated my assault, more than Sophie hates realizing she's been unknowingly complicit in trafficking children. We need to go public. Not just with the evidence, but with our story. All of it. The experiments, the trafficking, what they did to you both. Sophie's current condition, your assault, the babies, everything." "They'll destroy us," Victoria whispered. "The Foundation's lawyers will be powerless against a live-stream Christmas Day confession from both Harrison daughters. The evidence is backed up on servers worldwide. Chen made sure of it." Victoria stared at her son. "Sophie will lose everything. Her reputation, her career." "She's already lost those," Alexander said softly. "The moment she chose to save you both instead of protecting the family name. She's upstairs right now, recording her testimony." The baby stirred, his tiny hand gripping Victoria's finger. In that moment she saw not her attacker's eyes, but Sophie's determination, Alexander's strength. "There's something else you should know," Alexander continued. "The genetic tests came back. Your attacker, he was Jonathan Harrison's illegitimate son, your half-brother. He's been working for the Foundation, helping identify suitable candidates for their program. Your assault wasn't random. It was punishment for getting too close to the truth." Victoria's face went pale. "So my baby, Sophie's baby, are both Harrison heirs. The Foundation wasn't coming to take them. They were coming to protect the bloodline, to continue the experiments." Down the hall, Sophie's monitors began screaming again. As medical staff rushed past, Victoria made her decision. "Get me a laptop. If I'm going to destroy my father's legacy, I want to do it while looking into his grandchild's eyes. Let him see exactly what his necessary sacrifices created." Alexander reached for his phone, but Victoria caught his arm. "Wait. There's one thing Sophie doesn't know, something I found in Father's files, about Rachel." Alexander's heart stopped. "Rachel? Your Rachel? The girlfriend you left? The Foundation didn't just track their victims, Alexander. They tracked potential threats. Rachel's pregnancy, her accident. None of it was random." The weight of 20 years of guilt transformed into horror as Victoria continued. "Your child didn't die in that accident. The Foundation took them, and according to these records, they're here in Chicago, working for the very system that stole them." Through the NICU window, a young nurse walked past, one with Alexander's grey eyes. Time seemed to freeze in the sterile hospital corridor as Alexander stared through the NICU window at the young nurse Hannah Mitchell. According to her badge, his own grey eyes reflected back at him. 23 years old, the exact age his child would be. "She's been here 3 months," Victoria said softly. "Transferred from the Harrison Foundation's private medical center. They've been watching Sophie all along, waiting for her pregnancy. Your daughter was placed here to monitor her own stepmother." Before Alexander could process this, alarms blared throughout the hospital. Code Black, security breach, all personnel to emergency stations. Chen's voice crackled through their earpieces. "They're making their move. Harrison Foundation strike teams entering through the service entrance. They're here for both babies and to silence everyone who knows." And through the security feeds on his phone, Alexander watched black-clad figures moving efficiently through the hospital's lower levels. Leading them was a man whose face hit him like a physical blow, an older version of himself. Rachel's brother Marcus, the Foundation's head of security. "Hello, brother-in-law," Marcus's voice cut through their earpieces. "Did Victoria share the happy family news? Though I suppose Uncle is more accurate now, considering Hannah's parentage. Don't worry, we'll make this quick. The Foundation is very good at making people disappear on Christmas Eve. Just ask Rachel." In Sophie's room, monitors screamed as her condition deteriorated. The experimental treatment was failing. Through the glass, Alexander watched his wife struggle to finish recording her testimony, even as doctors rushed around her. "The babies are the priority," Sophie's voice came weakly through his earpiece. "Hannah, too. Save our children, Alexander. All of them." Victoria clutched her son closer, eyes darting between exits. "We're trapped. They control all the exits, have people in the hospital administration. Even if we expose everything now." "It won't matter," Hannah's voice made them both turn. She stood in the NICU doorway, tears streaming down her face. "I heard everything. I've known for months something was wrong with my assignments here, but I never imagined." She swallowed hard. "I have access codes. I can get us to the old pneumatic tube system. It connects to the children's shelter 3 blocks away." Alexander stared at his daughter, the baby he'd abandoned, the woman who'd been unknowingly serving her grandfather's evil cause. "Why would you help us?" "Because I've spent my life wondering why my mother died trying to expose the Harrison Foundation. Now I know." And she met Alexander's eyes. "I've spent 23 Christmas Eves wondering why my father left us. I'd like to hear that story someday, if we survive." The elevator dinged. Marcus and his team were getting closer. "Sophie's testimony is uploading," Chen reported. "But the Foundation is flooding the internet with disinformation. We need something more, something they can't bury." Hannah's hand went to her neck, pulling out a locket identical to Sophie's. "Mom's last message, the proof she died trying to expose. I always wear it, never knowing." She pulled out a micro SD card. "Everything's here. 23 years of evidence. Let's make it count." Suddenly the lights went out. Emergency generators hummed as Marcus's voice echoed through the darkness. "One last chance, Alexander. The Foundation can be very generous. Think of Hannah. We can be a family. The right kind of family." Through the darkness, Alexander heard Sophie's voice, weaker now. "Sometimes family is what you choose. Sometimes love means burning everything down to build something true." As if in answer, smoke began filling the corridor. The Foundation wasn't just coming to take them. They were going to burn the evidence and anyone connected to it. Hannah grabbed Victoria's arm. "The tubes. Now. But someone has to stay to upload Mom's evidence. Keep them busy." Alexander looked at his daughter, seeing Rachel's determination in her face. Then at Victoria, holding her son Sophie's nephew, Hannah's cousin, all of them bound by blood and betrayal, and maybe, just maybe, the chance for redemption. The smoke grew thicker. Sophie's monitors wailed. Marcus's men got closer. and in the dark hospital corridor on Christmas Eve, the time for choices had run out. Smoke painted apocalyptic shadows on the hospital walls as Alexander faced Marcus across the NICU, Hannah's locket clutched in his fist. Through the windows, Christmas lights still twinkled on distant buildings, surreally festive against the growing inferno. You know what's funny? Marcus's smile was eerily reminiscent of Jonathan Harrison's. Rachel begged for you at the end. Even after we staged her accident, she believed you'd come save her. Such faith in a man who abandoned his own child. Hannah stood rigid beside Alexander, her grey eyes, his eyes bright with unshed tears. You killed my mother, your own sister. I protected the family legacy. Marcus adjusted his foundation pin. Like I'm doing now. The Harrison bloodline is special. The experiments prove that. Why do you think the foundation only takes certain children? We're creating something greater. Through their earpieces, they heard Victoria's quiet voice from the pneumatic tube control room, evidence uploading. Chen, are you receiving? 50% uploaded. Keep them talking. The smoke thickened. In the distance, Sophie's monitors still beeped their desperate rhythm. You want to talk legacy? Alexander stepped forward. Let's talk about a man who experiments on his own daughters. Who has his son assault his daughter to continue his twisted breeding program? Who turns brothers against sisters, fathers against children? Progress requires sacrifice. Marcus's hand moved to his weapon. Jonathan Harrison understood that. Some bloodlines are meant to rule, others to serve. Your daughter there? She carries the superior genes. Your new baby, a perfect combination. Even Victoria's boy, a pure Harrison, despite the unfortunate circumstances of his conception. Hannah's voice shook the nurse training program. All those young mothers recruited from foster care. All carrying Harrison blood. Generations of careful selection. Marcus smiled. Did you never wonder why you were drawn to pediatrics? Why Sophie dedicated herself to children? The experiments enhanced certain instincts. Or smoke poured in. The Foundation's team was systematically burning every record, every piece of evidence. Upload at 70%, Chen reported. But the smoke's reaching critical levels. Sophie's voice, barely audible. Alexander. The baby can't breathe. Through the haze, Alexander saw the impossible choice before him. Hannah's evidence could destroy the Foundation, but the smoke would kill Sophie and their unborn child before it finished uploading. Victoria and her son were safely hidden, but for how long? Time to choose. Brother-in-law Marcus raised his weapon. Family or justice? Isn't that the choice you made with Rachel? Choose right this time and Hannah can know her father. Your new child can grow up in privilege, not persecution. The Harrison legacy can be your legacy. The smoke burned Alexander's lungs as memories flooded him. Rachel's smile, Sophie's faith, Victoria's pain, Hannah's lost years. Outside, church bells began tolling midnight. Upload at 80%, Chen called. But the hospital's evacuating. Fires spreading too fast. Hannah stepped forward, her hand finding Alexander's. Mom always said real family isn't about blood. It's about who you'd burn for. Through the smoke, they heard Sophie's doctor shouting orders, BP dropping. We're losing both of them. Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger. Last chance, Alexander. What's it going to be? Redemption or destruction? The smoke turned the Christmas lights outside into blurred halos as Alexander made his choice. Sometimes he realized redemption and destruction were the same thing. Chen, he said quietly, execute Protocol Omega. Hannah gasped as sprinklers exploded overhead, but not with water. A special compound designed by the Foundation themselves for evidence destruction began eating through every computer, every record, every piece of paper in the building. No Marcus lunged forward, but Hannah was faster. The syringe she'd palmed from the medical cart found his neck. The same memory-erasing compound her grandfather had perfected, that had been used on Sophie so long ago. "Merry Christmas," Uncle Marcus Hannah whispered. "Say goodbye to the family legacy." But as Marcus crumpled, alarms screamed from Sophie's room. The countdown to redemption was becoming a race against death. The hospital corridors had become a maze of smoke and shadow as three simultaneous dramas unfolded across different floors. In Sophie's room, doctors fought to save 2 lives. In the sealed evidence room, Victoria raced to protect 2 decades of truth. And in the NICU, Alexander and Hannah faced an army of Foundation operatives, with Marcus's unconscious body at their feet. Sophie's crashing Dr. Chen's voice crackled through their earpieces. "The baby's in distress. We need to deliver now or lose them both." Through the security feeds, they watched Victoria barricaded in the records room, cradling her son while uploading Hannah's evidence. Foundation teams were cutting through the door. "I can't get them all out." Hannah's voice broke as she calculated distances and survival odds. Mom's evidence or Sophie's baby? The NICU babies or Victoria? We don't have time for everyone. Alexander touched the locket at Hannah's throat, then the one from Sophie that had started everything. 2 identical pieces of a shattered family. Yes, we do. Because this time nobody gets left behind. He pulled up the hospital blueprints on his phone. "Hannah, you're the only one who knows the tube system. Get Victoria and the evidence out. I'll get Sophie." The other NICU babies already being evacuated through the West Wing. Chen's team has them. Alexander touched his daughter's face for the first time in 23 years. "Your mother died trying to expose the truth. Honor her by finishing what she started." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "But you. We'll see you soon? Go, give your uncle a double dose first. Insurance." As Hannah ran, Alexander faced the smoke-filled corridor leading to Sophie. The sprinklers had created a caustic rain, destroying evidence, but also making the air toxic. Without protective gear, the journey would be brutal. Alexander, Sophie's voice, barely a whisper through the earpiece. "Let me go. Save our daughter. Save the truth." 23 years ago, I ran away from my child. Alexander coughed, fighting through the smoke. Not this time. The Foundation security teams were converging on Victoria's position. Through the cameras, Alexander watched Hannah navigate the old tube system, guiding her aunt to safety while Foundation data burned around them. On another screen, Sophie's vitals dropped dangerously low. "BP critical," a doctor called. "We're losing the baby's heartbeat." Alexander reached Sophie's floor just as the backup generators failed. In the sudden darkness, he heard Victoria's son crying through the earpiece, a sound so like his own unborn child's monitored heartbeat. "Evidence secured," Chen reported. "Hannah and Victoria clear. But Alexander, Sophie's floor is gone. Support structures failing. You have 3 minutes max." The smoke parted briefly, revealing a Christmas tree in the family waiting room, its lights still bravely twinkling. Alexander thought of another Christmas Eve, another child he'd failed. The pattern had to break. He found Sophie's room by memory, fighting through debris. She lay pale and still, monitors dark, one hand protectively over her belly. "Alexander," she whispered as he lifted her. "The baby is a fighter, like their sister. Like their cousin. Like their mother who kept fighting for truth even when it hurt." The floor groaned beneath them. Through his earpiece, he heard Hannah coordinating with emergency services, Victoria soothing her son, Chen directing resources. A family coming together, born not from Harrison's twisted experiments but from choice. From love. Pray. Chen, Alexander called as ceiling tiles crashed around them. "Execute Protocol Genesis." Across Chicago, every Harrison Foundation computer received a Christmas message: full confession, complete records, decades of crimes, their legacy of darkness exposed in the season of light. Sophie stirred in his arms. The other babies. Victoria. Safe, all of them. Hannah saved them. Our daughter saved them. Hannah Sophie's eyes flickered. You found. She found us. Now hold on. One more miracle to go. The floor gave way as Alexander reached the emergency exit. Below, flames consumed the Harrison legacy. Above, through smoke and toxic rain, dawn's first light broke over Chicago's skyline. Christmas morning had arrived, and with it, the chance for redemption. Chicago Memorial's emergency wing erupted into controlled chaos as multiple trauma teams converged. Sophie was rushed to emergency surgery, her unborn child's heartbeat fading. Victoria's son, exposed to the toxic smoke, fought for breath in pediatric ECU. And through it all, Hannah moved between departments, her medical training and newfound family loyalty warring within her. BP dropping, fetal distress critical, the surgical team called. We need to deliver now. Alexander watched through the observation window, his hands pressed against the glass. The caustic rain from the sprinklers had burned his skin, but he barely noticed. Next to him, Victoria clutched her phone, streaming the worldwide explosion of Harrison Foundation exposures. It's over, she whispered. Every office, every facility. 27 countries, all their secrets, exposed on Christmas morning. Hannah rushed in, still in her smoke-stained scrubs. Mom's final evidence was the key. She'd gathered DNA profiles proving the breeding program. Hundreds of children, all carrying enhanced Harrison genes. All placed in positions of power. Through the surgical window, they watched Sophie's body arch as doctors fought to save 2 lives. The Christmas morning sun cast long shadows through the window, turning the operating room into a tableau of life and death. The Foundation's children, Victoria's voice shook. What happens to them? They're being contacted now. Hannah checked her tablet. Support services, counseling, full disclosure of their heritage. Chen's team is coordinating with international authorities. The Harrison legacy ends with truth, not secrets. Suddenly, alarms screamed from the operating room. Maternal hemorrhage. Baby's oxygen dropping. Hannah rushed to the intercom. Type-specific blood ready in trauma 3, and the experimental stem cell treatment. No, Victoria stepped forward. That treatment, it's derived from Father's research, from what he did to us. It's also Sophie's only chance, Hannah countered. Sometimes healing comes from transforming what was meant to harm us. Alexander watched his daughter, so much like Rachel in her fierce determination, take charge of the trauma response. The girl he'd abandoned had become a healer, turning the Foundation's dark science towards saving lives. In the PICU, Victoria's son's monitors stabilized. Through the hospital's network, they watched as more Foundation facilities were secured, more children discovered their true heritage, more families reunited. Christmas morning news channels exploded with headlines about the Harrison scandal. Alexander Sophie's weak voice through the surgical intercom. If you have to choose. No more choosing, he replied firmly. No more sacrificing one child for another. We save everyone or none at all. Hannah prepared the experimental treatment, her hands steady. This could save them both or kill them both. The same treatment that enhanced the Harrison bloodline. Could be its redemption. Victoria finished. Do it. As dawn broke over Chicago, Sophie's monitors stabilized. A baby's first cry pierced the tension, followed by impossible news from the PICU. Victoria's son's genetic damage was healing, his enhanced Harrison genes actually fighting off the toxins. A Christmas miracle, Hannah whispered, tears streaming. Or maybe just good genes finally used for healing instead of harm. Through the window, they watched Sophie hold her newborn daughter while reports flooded in Foundation members arrested worldwide, hidden children found, decades of darkness exposed to Christmas morning light. The Harrison legacy truly ends today. Victoria touched the glass separating her from her healing son, and something new begins. Alexander looked at his family, the daughter he'd abandoned, now a healer, the sister-in-law who'd turned her pain into justice, his wife who'd chosen truth over privilege, their newborn daughter who would grow up in light, not shadow. Not ends, he corrected softly. Transforms. The power was never in the experiments or the breeding program. It was in the choices we made, the love we chose, the truth we fought for. Hannah checked her patient's vitals one last time. "Merry Christmas, Dad," she whispered, testing the word. "Should we tell them the best part, about the genetic markers in the baby?" "What markers?" Victoria asked. Hannah smiled. "The enhanced genes, they're mutating, changing. Every child born to the Harrison line from now on will have one unique trait encoded in their DNA." "What trait?" "And the ability to heal others. We're not Superman or supervillains, just healers. All of us. That's the real miracle." Outside, church bells rang out across Chicago, welcoming Christmas morning. Inside, a family forged by choice rather than blood embraced their new legacy, not of power or control, but of healing, truth, and love. Dear readers, if this tale of redemption, family bonds, and Christmas miracles has touched your heart, we invite you to join our storytelling family. Every subscription is like a light in the darkness, helping us create more powerful narratives that explore the depths of human love and resilience. Together, we can continue crafting stories that remind us of hope's power to transform lives, just as Alexander's family discovered on that fateful Christmas Eve. Your support means more stories that touch hearts, heal wounds, and inspire change. Please subscribe to walk this journey with us. Like Alexander learned, sometimes the most beautiful things come from taking a chance on love and trust. Join our community of believers in the power of storytelling. The victory's price became clear in the days following Christmas. Sophie lay in intensive care, her body ravaged by both cancer and the experimental treatment that saved her. The healing genes now coursing through her system fought a brutal war against the damage done by decades of her father's experiments. Alexander found Hannah in the hospital chapel late one night, clutching Rachel's locket. "I found the recording," she said without turning. "Mum's last message before the accident. Want to know what her final words were?" He sat beside his daughter, both their reflections fractured in the stained glass. "Tell me." "I forgive him." Hannah's voice cracked. She knew they were coming for her, but she spent her last moments recording a message of forgiveness. For you. For choosing fear over love. The chapel's Christmas decorations still hung, their joy now seeming almost cruel. Down the hall, Victoria's son struggled with respiratory complications, his enhanced healing abilities taxed by the toxic exposure. Each labored breath was a reminder of what their victory had cost. 15 children dead, Hannah continued, showing him the latest report on her tablet. Foundation operatives eliminated them before we could rescue them. 15 families getting devastating news for Christmas. That's the price of our truth. The hospital TV played constant coverage of the scandal. Alexander watched the Harrison name become synonymous with evil. Sophie's prestigious medical career was over. No hospital would risk association with the scandal. Her life's work helping children, destroyed by exposing the truth about who had really been hurting them. In the NICU, Victoria stood vigil over her son, refusing to leave even as her own health deteriorated. The assault, the pregnancy, the trauma, her body was finally collapsing under the weight of it all. The healing genes could repair physical damage, but the emotional scars ran deeper. "I keep seeing their faces," she whispered when Alexander brought her coffee. "All those children in Father's files. The ones we couldn't save. The ones we couldn't save. The ones who died never knowing why they were special. Why they were cursed. How many more are out there? How many did we miss?" The Foundation's fall had created a vacuum. Other organizations were already moving to fill it, some with equally dark intentions. The enhanced children they'd saved would need lifetime protection. No normal life would ever be possible for them. Chen's daily reports grew grimmer. Foundation loyalists were retaliating. 3 whistleblowers dead. 2 witness protection facilities compromised. The truth had been exposed, but truth, they were learning, could be as destructive as secrets. In Sophie's room, the Christmas tree she'd insisted on keeping shed needles onto the sterile floor. She was awake now, but changed. The recovered memories haunted her nights. Her screams would echo through the hospital wing, a respected surgeon reduced to a terrified 6-year-old watching her sister being taken away. Was it worth it, she asked Alexander during one lucid moment. Saving everyone but destroying their chance at normal life. Our daughter will never know peace. Victoria's son will always be hunted. Hannah can never practice medicine openly again. Alexander had no answer. He watched his newfound family pay the price for his redemption, for their collective choice to expose the truth. The healing genes were a miracle, yes, but miracles, he was learning, came with their own kind of curse. The hardest part, Hannah told him, her grey eyes heavy with knowledge beyond her years, isn't what we lost. It's knowing that even with all our power to heal, some wounds will never mend. Some costs can't be repaid. Outside the hospital, Christmas decorations came down. The season of miracles ended, leaving them to face the harsh reality of what their victory had really cost. The first month of the new year brought relentless snow to Chicago, burying the city in white silence. In Sophie's private room at the rehabilitation center, the television played endless coverage of the Harrison Foundation fallout. Another suicide, a prominent judge discovered to be part of the breeding program, had shot himself in front of his children. "Turn it off," Sophie whispered, unable to look at the screen. Her once precise surgeon's hands shook as she tried to hold her newborn daughter. The healing genes were saving her life, but they couldn't restore what the treatments had taken. Her motor control, damaged by the experimental protocols, meant she would never operate again. 30 years of surgical experience, she told Alexander one grey morning. Thousands of children saved. Was that all tainted? Every child I treated, was I unknowingly screening them for the program? Were my surgical instincts really just father's experiments manifesting? In the adjacent room, Victoria fought her own battles. Her son was physically healing, but each time she held him, flashbacks of the assault paralyzed her. The Foundation's files had revealed the horrifying truth: her attacker, their half-brother, had been specifically chosen to create a pure Harrison heir. "I look at him," Victoria confided to Hannah during their therapy session, "and I see both victim and perpetrator. He carries the genes of our abuser, but he's also just an innocent baby. How do I love him without remembering the horror of his conception?" Hannah's own loss manifested differently. Her healing gift, once used to help others, now marked her as a target. 3 attempts had already been made to kidnap her for study. Her promising medical career evaporated as hospitals, fearing liability, refused to employ anyone connected to the Harrison scandal. "I lost my mother twice," she told Alexander during one of their midnight talks in the hospital cafeteria. Once when she died, and again learning the truth about why. Every memory is poisoned now. Was she really proud when I got into medical school, or was that the Harrison genes working as designed? The hardest losses were the invisible ones: trust, innocence, the ability to believe in simple goodness. Each new revelation from Chen's ongoing investigation carved away another piece of their faith in humanity. They discovered Sophie's charitable foundation for orphan children had unknowingly funneled potential candidates to her father's program. Victoria's legal advocacy had been monitored, her cases manipulated to identify genetically desirable families. Even Alexander's real estate empire had been used to create safe houses for the Foundation's operations. "Everything we built," Sophie said, staring out at the snow, "every good thing we tried to do was corrupted without our knowledge. How do we ever trust our own intentions again?" The healing genes themselves became a source of torment. They could feel others' pain now, literally sense the suffering around them. Hannah spent sleepless nights pacing the hospital corridors, overwhelmed by the empathic connection to every patient's agony. "It's not a gift," she finally broke down, telling Alexander. "It's torture. Feeling everyone's pain but being unable to help most of them. Knowing that trying to help could expose us, put more lives at risk." Victoria's son, they discovered, had an even stronger version of the ability. His infant cries would intensify whenever anyone nearby was hurting. They had to isolate him in a special ward, the emotional bombardment too much for his developing mind to handle. "We're not healers," Victoria said bitterly one night, watching her son through isolation glass. "We're emotional vampires, cursed to feel the world's pain without the power to truly fix it. Father didn't create miracles, he created beautifully wrapped torture devices." The deepest loss was their sense of purpose. Everything they'd believed about their lives, their choices, their achievements, their very identities was now suspect. Had any of it been real, or were they all just playing out genetic programming designed by a madman? Maybe, Sophie whispered in her darkest moment, Victoria was the lucky one all those years ago. At least she got to live believing she was truly herself, not just another of Father's experiments. The snow kept falling, burying Chicago in white silence, as inside the rehabilitation center, a broken family struggled with a question none of them dared voice aloud: was saving the truth worth losing themselves? February brought black ice and bitter winds to Chicago. In the rehabilitation center's family meeting room, 4 broken people sat in silence as their therapist tried to help them process their collective trauma. The Christmas miracle had become a winter nightmare. "I want to block the healing gene," Hannah announced suddenly, her voice hollow. "Chen found a way. A genetic inhibitor." I can't feel everyone's pain anymore." Her hands shook as she pulled out the research. "Last night, a child died in my ward. I felt every second of it. I can't be a doctor like this." Sophie, still struggling to hold a pen steady, looked at her own daughter sleeping in her carrier. The enhanced empathy is already showing in her. She cries whenever anyone nearby is hurting. Is this our legacy? Children who have to be isolated to avoid feeling the world's pain? Victoria hadn't spoken in days. Her son's increasing sensitivity had forced them to move him to a specially shielded room. The Foundation's files had revealed the truth: each generation's abilities grew stronger. Her baby could feel trauma through walls now. "The inhibitor has risks," Hannah continued, not meeting Alexander's eyes. "Permanent neural damage, potential cardiac complications." But her voice broke. "I'd rather die as myself than live as his experiment." Alexander watched his daughter, the child he'd abandoned, found, and might lose again, and felt the weight of generational sin. The Harrison legacy wasn't just in their genes, it was in their souls now. The final blow came that afternoon. Chen's investigation uncovered a hidden vault in the Harrison mansion. Inside, they found Jonathan Harrison's personal journals. The truth was worse than they'd imagined. "It wasn't just experiments," Victoria read, her voice dead. "He designed us, deliberately bred for specific traits. Sophie's surgical gift, my legal mind, Hannah's medical intuition, none of it was ours. We're not even people, we're products." Sophie collapsed into Alexander's arms, her body racked with sobs. "My whole life, every child I saved, it was all just programming, is programming." The therapist tried to intervene, but how do you counsel people discovering they're designed rather than born? How do you find meaning when your very essence is revealed as artificial? That night they hit bottom. Victoria attempted suicide, the emotional bombardment from her son finally too much to bear. Hannah disappeared, leaving only a note: "Finding Mom's real killer. Don't look for me." Sophie's physical therapy regressed so severely she could no longer hold her baby. Alexander stood in the hospital chapel, the same place where their Christmas miracle had begun. The stained glass windows reflected nothing but darkness now. Their family, so briefly whole, was shattering. "You won," he whispered to Jonathan Harrison's memory. "You made us special, then made us suffer for our specialness. You didn't just corrupt our bodies, you corrupted hope itself." In Sophie's room, the monitors beeped steadily, marking time in a life that no longer felt real. Victoria lay sedated, separated from her son by walls designed to block their devastating connection. Somewhere in the city, Hannah hunted answers that might destroy what little peace they had left. The healing genes that should have been their salvation had become their curse. Every moment of joy was tainted by feeling others' sorrow. Every achievement suspect, every memory questioned. They were trapped in a genetic prison of enhanced empathy and engineered talents. Perhaps Sophie whispered, watching the city lights blur through her tears, "This is why they say the truth sets you free. Because once everything is broken, there's nothing left to lose." Outside, Chicago's winter raged on, as cold and dark as the void growing in their hearts. The family forged in Christmas miracle was falling apart, each member retreating into their private hells, each wrestling with the same devastating question. Hannah's message arrived at midnight. "Dad, St. Anthony's Church. Now, found Rachel's killer." But that's not the real story. Alexander found his daughter in the empty church, surrounded by candlelight, her laptop casting a blue glow on centuries-old stone. On the screen, security footage from the night Rachel died 23 years ago. "Watch," Hannah said quietly. "Mom wasn't running from the foundation. She was running toward something, someone." The grainy video showed Rachel, heavily pregnant, meeting an elderly priest. She handed him a flash drive and a letter. The priest's face became clear as he turned the same man who'd helped them at St. Michael's on Christmas Eve. Father Thomas Alexander whispered. He knew. Everything, Hannah finished, including the truth about why the Harrison genes really exist. Mom found it first. That's why they killed her. Victoria peered from the shadows, steadier now after her crisis. "Show him." Hannah opened Rachel's letter, preserved by the priest for 23 years. "My dearest Alexander, if you're reading this, they've succeeded in silencing me. But they can't silence the truth. The Harrison experiments weren't creating enhanced humans. They were trying to reverse what was already there. The healing gene? The empathy? It's not artificial, it's ancient, natural. The Harrison family didn't create special children, they found them, tracked them, tried to control them. Your daughter will be special not because of their experiments, but in spite of them. Jonathan Harrison's real crime wasn't playing God, it was trying to cage angels. Sophie wheeled herself in, their baby asleep in her lap. There's more, she said. Father Thomas showed me hospital records from the 1800s. Children born with inexplicable abilities to ease pain, sense suffering, heal with a touch. The Harrison Foundation didn't engineer us, they hunted us. The church's ancient walls seemed to hold their breath as Hannah played her final piece of evidence, Jonathan Harrison's secret video confession, found in Rachel's hidden files. The empaths or naturally occurring Harrison's voice echoed through the church, one in every few thousand births. We thought we could isolate the gene, control it, breed it to our specifications. But we failed. Every attempt to manipulate it only made it stronger, purer, more divine. Victoria cradled her son, who for the first time seemed peaceful in the sacred space. The isolation ward wasn't blocking his abilities. It was blocking the Foundation's suppression technology. They weren't enhancing our gifts. They were trying to contain them. That's why the healing hurts so much, Hannah realized. We're fighting against their chemical restraints, their genetic chains. We're not cursed. We're free, Sophie finished. For the first time in generations, truly free. Alexander watched his family in the candlelight, not broken experiments, but natural miracles. The Christmas snow they'd thought was burying them had really been cleansing them, preparing them for this revelation. Father Thomas appeared, ancient now, but eyes still bright. Rachel died protecting this truth. The Harrison Foundation spent generations trying to bottle divine light. but you can't cage what God made free. Hannah took her father's hand, her grey eyes, Rachel's eyes, shining with tears. Mom's last message wasn't just forgiveness. It was hope. We're not monsters or experiments. We're exactly what we were born to be. Through the stained glass windows, dawn began to break over Chicago. The winter that had seemed endless was finally yielding to spring, and in an old church filled with new truth, a family began to understand that their greatest wound had always been their greatest gift. But they weren't carrying a curse. They were carrying light. In the days following their church revelation, each family member began experiencing their curse differently. The rehabilitation center's garden, now blooming with early spring flowers, became their sanctuary for understanding their reborn identities. Sophie discovered it first during physical therapy. I was trying to hold my pen. She told them, demonstrating with steady hands, and instead of fighting my body's tremors, I listened to them. They weren't random. They were guiding me toward patients who needed help most. My surgeon's instincts weren't programmed, they were trying to break free from the programming. Her daughter, rather than crying at others' pain, now gurgled with joy when people experienced emotional breakthroughs. The baby wasn't just feeling trauma, she was celebrating healing. Victoria found her son's isolation room transformed. The walls that once protected him now appeared covered in soft, colorful auras, his gift, showing him not just people's pain, but their capacity for recovery. He's not overwhelmed anymore, Victoria realized, watching him track the healing energies. He's mapping it. Every person's unique path to wholeness. That's why the Foundation feared our children most. They see truth too pure to corrupt. Hannah's medical understanding deepened beyond science. Working with terminal patients, she discovered her gift wasn't just sensing pain, it was understanding life's natural transitions. Death under her care became peaceful, meaningful, a completion rather than an ending. Mum knew, she said, showing them Rachel's journal entries. She wrote about divine mathematics, how every suffering has purpose, every wound creates capacity for greater healing. The Foundation tried to weaponize divine grace, but grace, by definition, can't be controlled. Alexander found his own role transforming. His real estate developer's eye for fixing broken places evolved into understanding spaces of natural healing. Buildings, he realized, could either block or amplify their gifts. That's why certain places feel sacred, he explained, sketching plans for a new kind of hospital. They're designed in harmony with healing energy. The Foundation used architecture to suppress our abilities. We can use it to set them free. Father Thomas brought ancient texts describing their kind throughout history. The laying on of hands, healing springs, miracle workers. You're not alone, he told them. You're part of an ancient lineage of natural empaths. The Harrison Foundation didn't create you. They tried to cage what has always been wild and holy. Sophie's medical records revealed the Foundation's desperation. Every treatment had actually been an attempt to suppress abilities that kept breaking through. Their genes weren't enhanced, they were resilient, constantly fighting to express their natural state. Look at this, Hannah pointed to laboratory data. Their suppression techniques worked less with each generation. Victoria's son, my sister, they're not stronger because of genetic manipulation. They're stronger because the truth couldn't be contained anymore. Victoria found peace with her son's parentage. He's not his father's child, she realized. The assault was meant to corrupt the bloodline, but grace can't be corrupted. He's pure light, born from darkness, the ultimate proof of divine alchemy. In the garden center, they created a healing circle. Instead of fighting their sensitivity to others' pain, they learned to channel it. Their gifts flowed naturally when they worked together. Sophie's medical insight, Victoria's justice-seeking spirit, Hannah's understanding of transitions, Alexander's sense of sacred space. The Foundation's real crime, Father Thomas explained, wasn't just causing suffering. It was denying the divine purpose of suffering to create healers who understand pain deeply enough to help transform it. Rachel's final journal entry, read by candlelight in their circle, captured their new understanding. To my daughter and all who carry this gift. You are not mistakes or experiments. You are rememberers of an ancient truth, that humanity's capacity to feel pain is matched by its capacity to heal it. Your sensitivity is not weakness. It is light refusing to be dimmed. Trust the holy ache that guides you. It was never meant to be controlled. Only honored, shared, and set free. The spring breeze carried cherry blossoms through their circle as they sat together, no longer broken but breaking free, understanding at last that their greatest wound had always been their truest gift. They were never meant to be perfect. They were meant to be healers. Beautifully, humanly, divinely broken healers. Spring rain fell softly outside Marcus Harrison's prison cell as Alexander and Hannah sat across from him, separated by glass. The former Foundation enforcer had aged decades in months, his face hollowed by the weight of recovered memories. "The inhibitor drugs," he said quietly, "they're wearing off. I can feel everything now. Every person I hurt, every family I destroyed. It's unbearable." Hannah placed her hand against the glass. "That's why we're here, Uncle Marcus. Not to punish you more, but because your pain is part of our healing." In the hospital wing, Sophie and Victoria faced their father for the first time. Jonathan Harrison, once powerful, now lay dying as his own experiments consumed him. His enhanced genes, suppressed for decades, were destroying his body as they broke free. "I thought I was protecting humanity," he whispered, "controlling a power too dangerous to be free. But I was wrong. The divine can't be caged. I didn't make you special. I only hurt what was already sacred." Victoria held her son, letting her father see his grandson's pure, uncorrupted gift. The baby's presence filled the room with gentle light, showing not just pain but the possibility of healing. "I forgive you," Victoria said, surprising herself, "not because you deserve it, but because carrying hatred hurts my son. He feels everything, Father. Teaching him to heal means healing ourselves." In the hospital garden, Hannah found Rachel's final resting place. She knelt in the wet grass, planting spring flowers as Alexander watched. "Mum's gift was the strongest," she said. "She could feel the light in people even through their darkness. That's why she forgave you before she died. She saw past your fear to your capacity for love." The Foundation's victims began coming forward not for revenge, but for healing. Children born with natural gifts, adults discovering their suppressed abilities, families carrying generations of unexplained empathy. Their healing circle grew. Marcus agreed to testify, his awakened empathy compelling truth. The Foundation didn't just hurt empaths, he explained. They hurt humanity's natural capacity for connection. Every person has a spark of this gift. We tried to control it in some by suppressing it in everyone. Jonathan Harrison's deathbed confession brought deeper understanding. His own father had been a natural healer, driven mad by uncontrolled empathy. Fear of that madness had driven generations of Harrisons to seek control rather than acceptance. The greatest violence, Father Thomas told them, was convincing divine healers that they were broken. True forgiveness isn't forgetting the harm, it's reclaiming the light that the darkness couldn't dim. Sophie found she could forgive herself for staying silent about Victoria. Her daughter helped her understand the scared 6-year-old had been as much a victim as her sister. Both needed healing, not blame. Alexander's real estate empire transformed into healing spaces. The abandoned buildings he once developed became sanctuaries where natural empaths could safely explore their gifts. Marcus, from his prison cell, helped identify Foundation properties to convert. But Victoria's legal work shifted from prosecution to restoration. She created programs helping Foundation victims reconnect with their natural abilities, turning trauma into wisdom. Her son grew stronger as she healed, his gift no longer overwhelming but purposeful. Forgiveness, Hannah told her patients, doesn't mean the pain never happened. It means the pain no longer controls the story. We're not forgiving to free others. We're forgiving to free ourselves. In their healing circle, they honored each step of recovery. Rachel's journal became their guide. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's remembering differently, seeing how wounds become wisdom, how broken paths lead to healing, how divine light enters through our cracks. We forgive because we feel everything. And feeling everything means feeling hope, even in the darkest places. This is our true inheritance. Not perfect healing, but perfect love. The spring rain fell like tears, washing away winter's last traces. In prison cells and hospital rooms, in gardens and sanctuaries, divine light broke through human darkness, not erasing it, but transforming it. They were learning that true forgiveness, like true healing, isn't a destination. It's a path walked daily with grace, a holy ache leading home. And in that holy moment, on another Christmas Eve, they understood at last. The greatest miracle was not what they could do, but what love could do through them. Not in being special, but in helping everyone remember. They had been special all along. Divine light shone on, all through darkness into dawn, generation after generation, free at last to flow, through willing hearts, through open hands, through healing love. Forever home, dear cherished viewers. If this story of healing, redemption, and divine love has touched your heart, we invite you to become part of our storytelling family. By subscribing to our channel, you help us continue creating powerful narratives that remind us of hope's eternal presence. Please share this video with your loved ones. Let them experience the magic of Christmas miracles and the power of unconditional love. Your likes and comments create a community of healing hearts, sharing in the journey together. Hit the like button if you believe in second chances, subscribe if you want more touching stories, and share your thoughts below. How did this story affect you? What moments moved you most? Together we can spread light through storytelling, one heart at a time. Join our family of believers in the power of love and redemption.
Creators, but it's rememberers.
And in that holy moment, on another Christmas Eve, they understood at last. The greatest miracle was not what they could do, but what love could do through them. Not in being special, but in helping everyone remember. They had been special all along. Divine light shone on, and through darkness into dawn, generation after generation, free at last to flow, through willing hearts, through open hands, through healing love, forever home. Dear cherished viewers, if this story of healing, redemption, and divine love has touched your heart, we invite you to become part of our storytelling family. By subscribing to our channel, you help us continue creating powerful narratives that remind us of hope's eternal presence. Please share this video with your loved ones. Let them experience the magic of Christmas miracles and the power of unconditional love. Your likes and comments create a community of healing hearts sharing in the journey together. Hit the like button if you believe in second chances, subscribe if you want more touching stories, and share your thoughts below. How did this story affect you? What moments moved you most? Together, we can spread light through storytelling, one heart at a time. Join our family of believers in the power of love and redemption.